Hartson, Midlothian City Councilman. How are you?
Pretty good. Good to talk to you today.
You know what? It's really good to have you on. Had you on when you were a candidate, and now you're a
Yep.
seasoned councilman, and you know, I've seen you grow. I've seen you go through the things. The city has been through a lot. So I wanted to have you on because you are running for reelection and you have
Yep.
challengers, and I've had them on, and you are the incumbent. So um, first, I wanted to ask you to kind of introduce yourself because as we were talking, there are definitely some growth in this place.
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on. I seem to remember when you first started your shows, when I first started my first campaign in 2020 during COVID, and you were looking for to get that first candidate on. And I don't remember, but there was a mutual friend that kind of introduced us. And I said, I don't know. I don't know that guy. I'm not too sure. And you reached out to me and I was like, I think I like this guy. Hang on. Okay, I'll do it. And I want to say I was either your first committed guest and maybe your second show or something along those lines.
I had a little show before this that I canned and got away from, and then I ended up starting this one. But
Okay.
my very first interview was David, who was running for Midlothian school board, and then I had Andrea, and yeah, you were one of the first ones on too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a labor of love. It's been a while, so but enough
Um,
about me.
well, as you said, my name is Hud Hartson. I'm running for re-election to Midlothian City Council, place 6. I've lived here almost my entire 50 years. Um, I'm a staunch conservative. Uh, I'm a 18-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department. I have a proven track record of conservatism, of voting to lower the tax rate. Uh, I've taken steps to help the taxpayers at every step of the way. I'm a voice for people. When people aren't paying attention to politics, which is most people don't pay attention to politics 90% of the year, I'm there. I'm someone they can trust. I'm someone that'll pull back the curtain of the government and talk to them in an open and honest way. Someone they can confide in, someone that will fight for them and hold people accountable in our city government.
Yeah. And I can attest that every time I've had a question, I have been able to come to you and say, Hud, what's going on with this, and kind of get some insight, into how you're seeing the things are going.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of tell the voters in this time, and how many years has it been already, Hud? Three?
I was elected after a runoff in December of 2020, and that
2020.
was to replace the late Art Perard due to his untimely death. And so I had to turn around and run again the following May. So I was in office 5 or 6 months at that time, and won my reelection the following May. And that's a 3-year term. So here we are in 2024, and I'm running for a third term.
That is outstanding. So, in these last 3 years,
Mhm.
what has been the hardest or the biggest lesson that you've learned compared to when you were a candidate to now?
The biggest lesson I've learned, I would say, in this full 3-year term, um, adjusting to politics. I'm a public servant uh, in my real life, so to speak, and I'm used to being a public servant. I'm not comfortable in around politicians. I consider myself a public servant, and so running around in the circles of politics at times can be frustrating. There's a disconnect between our citizens and politicians in this country at all levels, from the president to the governors to the congressmen to the state reps. There's a disconnect. There's a lack of trust, and I've worked very hard to build trust with people when they come to me. I shoot them straight. I can't always agree with people when they come to me, but when I can, we can work something out. And when we can't, if we disagree, we simply disagree, and I try to state my case. But if someone comes to me as a council member needing something, I've always tried to reach out and help them. But in the last 3 years, it's adjusting to the political world that's probably been the most difficult for me.
Transparency is big. when you're running in government, and you alluded to some of the trust issues in this country, and
Hmm.
I mean, city council, school board, they're not immune to it.
They're not.
There's issues. So transparency in the last 3 years, how have you, embodied that? How have you tried to keep that, going? Because we
Well,
talked about transparency on the first show. So tell
yeah.
me about that.
Well, before I got on council, there were some voices that wanted to get our city council meetings live streamed, and uh, I'm a supporter of that. I think we need that for transparency. And quite frankly, it's helped me go back and look at some prior votes and stuff like that. So it's helped me too. But, you know, one thing I did notice is, hey, all of our workshops weren't being videoed, or at least recorded, if not live streamed. And it kind of bothered me, especially because some of them were about money, about taxpayer dollars. And those, I think, always, I don't understand how that's not a state law that they have to be video recorded or something. Taxpayers are out earning wages, and they don't often have time to go to these workshops that we have during the day. And so for them to be videotaped is a big deal. And I worked with Mayor Kaufman, and we made him and I together made sure that our workshops are at least audio taped, but almost all the time they're videotaped. So
Yeah,
that's one way I've worked to further the transparency.
you talked about, and you alluded to this a little bit, and you talked about accountability. How
Yes, sir.
important is accountability in your position?
When you don't have when the taxpayers and voters, citizens don't have accountability for public officials, it starts to spiral out of control. Um, we need to look no further than our national government. A lot of our politicians on both sides of the aisle are out of control. They go in as middle class Americans, they come out as the top 1%, and it spirals out of control. And on the local level and county level, it's no different. There's not that money in play, but accountability for us, citizens have to find a way to hold us accountable, and or people like me, in office, have got to find ways to hold ourselves accountable. And if anyone has an idea to hold us further accountable, hey, I'm all for it. And like they say, the greatest way to hold someone accountable is at the voting booth. So citizens always have the last answer in that. But accountability, I think we do a good job as a city of being transparent. There's a few things we can improve, but for the most part, we do a very good job of being transparent.
I've seen that on this council. I definitely can say that I've seen that. I love. I just never thought I'd be able to reach out to elected officials and be able to talk to them like I
Mhm.
have, and it's a blessing of the show. But it's also, it says a lot about you guys and who you are. Um, what has been the most to you? What do you think is the most pressing issue facing the city of Midlothian in the last 3 years? What has been like the big one that's hit you?
There's three or four of them, but when you said that, the first thing that popped in my mind is taxes. We have people that have lived here their entire lives, that have done their due diligence in retirement, and they're being taxed out of their home. And as you know, in our tax bill, the only portion of that me or we as a city control is the city part. There's the county, the schools, and the city. There's three parts of that tax bill, and the only one we can control is the city part. Um, uh, Citizens should never be taxed out of their houses. It's not American. It's not American. It feels wrong. And I don't know a single person I've ever talked to that about that doesn't have a little rile up in their system when you give them the image of someone being taxed out of their home. It's just not right. Um, that's the biggest issue. That's the biggest issue for
Mhm.
me as far as our city right now, and that's been the biggest issue the last couple of years for me in taking the steps that I have to correct that.
So talk to me, since we since you mentioned taxes. Talk to me about taxes. How have you approached in the last 3 years when you've done these budget processes, how
Yeah.
and we're going to go into budget side, but
Hmm.
right now is the taxes. How have you approached the tax rate in these last few years?
Well, there's two schools of thought. There's a school of thought of, hey, you're a growing city. You need your tax base. You need your tax rate to be, where it needs to be to afford certain things. Then there's the other school of thought that we need taxes as low as possible, um, and find ways to cut through the budget and to help the taxpayer. And that's where I stand. You know, Here recently, about a month ago, I helped push through support. I voted for it. We have a senior tax freeze in Midlothian, and basically, I think it was about the year 2001. The city created that, and they established the figure at $70,000. So the first $70,000 of a senior's home was tax free from the city. Well, fast forward to 2024, that $70,000 isn't the same $70,000 as it was back then.
Absolutely not.
And so we needed to do something about that. I fought for that. I fought for it to get increased, and we more than doubled that. So here recently we passed a new senior tax freeze to $150,000. So we more than doubled that. That's one way. So if it's seniors that lived here their entire life, the first $150,000 of their home is tax exempt.
Mhm.
Another thing we've done is the state was gracious enough to give the citizens a tax break through a homestead exemption. I won't go into the intricacies of it right here. We don't have time, but the homestead exemption is great for people with their land and their home. The state allowed us to do up to a 20% homestead exemption, and right out of the chute, we hit it with 10%, and then we hit it with 10 more percent. So as a city, we have maxed out what the state allows us right now at a 20% tax exemption. So that's two examples for you, the ways I've been fighting. Our city council has been fighting to help citizens with their taxes.
So you're in budget time right now, and I plan on having the mayor on somewhere, probably around July, roughly, to talk budget and
Hmm.
the details on that. But you're coming into this budget now, and there's some challenges, and we'll kind of go into those. But in the last three
Hmm.
years, what has been your approach when doing the budget? Have you challenged, certain expenses, certain line items? What has been your approach?
Yeah, and that's where it comes down to philosophy. When you go into the budget talks, um, you have to realize, and you have to run your city government, or at least I do. You have your wants and you have your needs. They're not the same thing. What does your city need to run? What does it take to run? And then if there's money left over, what do you want? And you can't confuse the two things. As far as the city needs, as I said before, I'm a first responder. I'm a veteran, multi-generational police officer. I firmly believe that any city's top priority day to day is the safety of its citizens. And I believe that we have a fantastic police department. Um, the boots on the ground do a fantastic job. I've interacted with them myself on calls. I've talked to citizens. They do a fantastic job. Matter of fact, our fire department, led by Chief McCaskill, is one of the finest in the country. They're recently recognized. It's not just us saying that; they were recognized as that. But since I took office, one of the things I'm proud of is I have looked at, and we as a city have looked at the pay scales of comparable cities around us, and we looked and we decided after looking at this pay scale that we were below the average of comparable cities. So we had to work that into the budget a couple years ago, and it was a challenge. But our first responders in Midlothian, since I've taken office, and I can't take sole credit for it, but I'm saying that me being on the council played a part in it. They've seen about a 25% pay raise since 2020. Our firefighters and police officers. So when it comes to time to budget, there's things like that. If you want to give them a raise, well, is it in the budget? Is it? If it's not, where do you cut? And so I have been very careful about where I cut in the budget. the things that I think, hey, that's a want. Let's set that to the side. I'm not saying cut it, but let's set it to the side. And we've done that. I voted to reduce the tax rate several times. And I'm a firm believer that when you separate needs and wants, you can keep the taxes low at the same time and have everything that you and the citizens need and want in a city. It's just a matter of paying attention to detail, taking more time than usual to go line by line down the budget. And yes, that takes more time, but that's what the citizens want. That's what they deserve.
And it's it's big, that budget. I mean, I've seen it and tried to read through it, and there's so much going on in that budget
There is.
this year. I know that you guys are in workshops and just starting off. You're starting to look at it little by little.
Mm-hmm.
What has the city kind of presented to you as its priorities, and what is your personal? I know you can't speak for the council, but
Right.
what is your personal priorities in this year's upcoming budget?
Well, for an example, as a council member, there's two things you can do when you take action. You can wait for things to come onto your agendas twice a month when we have council meetings, and you can be proactive. And one of the things I've done to be proactive is, I'll give you an example. Our police department, they can accrue 48 hours of comp time. So when they work overtime, they get either pay or they can get comp time. And right now they can only accrue 48 hours. And I've sat down with city staff, and I've sat down with the city attorney, and I've sat down with several council members about this. And, to increase that to 100, to 150 costs the city no money. So it doesn't add to the budget, and it adds to their morale. If they're going to take several family vacations a year and they can only accrue so much time, well, they might not be able to take the 2 vacations. So then they're in a situation where they've got to choose, the family event out of state or this vacation. If they could accrue more comp time and save up more time, they can do both. That raises morale. It helps in recruiting. And so that's one thing I'm going to try to get approved in this year's budget. And I'm going to try to get that in there. And it's to no cost to the city. It only benefits the morale of our first responders. There's that. But I think the number one challenge to directly hit your question is, there's some things with our police department that we need to get done that aren't boots on the ground, that aren't adding numbers, because we're always adding numbers to the police department, but it's not necessarily that. It's things we need, tools that they need, software that they need that cost a lot of money. And so we're really going to have to work together to find room in the budget to afford those things, because our police department deserves the best we can give them. Because the best we can give our police department is the best they can give our citizens. And the citizens here deserve the best. We have a great department, but we need to make sure our department stays great. So I think that's going to be the number one issue for our council, is tackling the things that our police department needs in the background.
Along with the police and firefighters, how has staffing been in just in general in the city? Are we doing okay with staffing? Because I know that there's a lot of poaching that happens in these city governments,
Yes,
and
yes.
there's a lot of poaching and a lot of recruiting and stuff, and it's a very competitive market for good
Yeah.
people. And so, how are we doing when it comes to personnel, just in general?
Since I've taken office, we've lost, I don't know, 2 or 3 key personnel, but I think that's normal. And the ones that we did lose, they took jobs similar to what they had here, but for more pay. And you can rarely fault a guy for taking more pay, right? Um, when we did that study a couple years ago about pay, we also did it about staffing. Staffing was included in that, and not to pick on Waxahachie, but we're a similar sized town. They probably have about 5,000 more people than we do, maybe 6, but we had about 100 fewer employees than they did. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think for the most part, it's a good thing. We do more with less employees. And I just talked to you about how your council seat works. You can vote on things that come to you, and you also need to find ways to be proactive. to bring things to the table. And one of the things I brought to the table is we have a huge uh, desire in our city for sports. And it shows when it gets to the high school level, all the state championships, we've won now and in the recent years, and the recent soccer team, and then the girls soccer team a few years before that. And it shows, but that doesn't start at the high school level. That starts, when our kids are little, playing soccer, playing t-ball, and there's a shortage of fields. There's a shortage of fields to play and practice on. And one of the biggest problems I pinpointed when I took office is these leagues work under our parks department scheduling wise, because they have to come to us to use our fields. And our parks director, Heather, she does a fantastic job, but she was just getting inundated. I was getting inundated with calls from parents griping, hey, we were supposed to have this field at this time. Someone else is on it. They won't get off of it. What can we do? And I was getting to where I was sending these parents to Heather because she was having to do the scheduling. But this is our parks director. She has so much more to do than scheduling. And a couple years into in the budget talks, they had projected to have a person come in a new position under the parks director, under Heather, and handle scheduling. That's all this position would do, is handle the scheduling in the fields for all the leagues. And there are thousands of kids in leagues in Midlothian. And I said, hey, hang on a second, guys. And that's why I worked with the rest of the council a couple years ago. And I got that pushed through there. Well, we're going to bring in that position in 2 years. I said, guys, it can't wait. It cannot wait. If it waits, then Heather's basically going to be turned into a scheduler. And that's not what we have her as a park director doing. That's not what she should be doing. So we brought that position in. And I think that position, the personnel we have in that position now, is doing a good job of working with these leagues, scheduling, making sure all the fields are utilized. So, there's things like that you can do proactive, and it got passed, and that position got added early, but we needed that to be brought in early.
Right. Since we were talking budget and you kind of and you went into parks, there was a bond, or there's been bonds in the past
Mm-hmm.
for different things that involved Parks and Rec. Can you kind of tell me the status of them? Why have they been? I know some of them have been delayed. It's been several years since they were passed. So can you kind of speak on them?
Which bonds did you say?
Did we have a Parks and Recs
Oh,
library bond or something? Did the city have a bond like that they haven't issued yet?
yes. So there were the three bonds that were passed. One of them was for a rec center.
Right.
One of them, one of them was roads, and we're utilizing that bond towards roads. The other one was for the police station,
Mm-hmm.
and currently the police station is being built. I'm not sure how far along they are. I would say they're probably at least halfway. Another one was for the new city hall / library. And if anyone's been downtown recently, they've seen that building. It's probably about halfway there. And the one that has not been put out is the rec center.
Right.
In that bond, the money was not included for land, and so we have some ideas for where to put that, and it would most likely be in conjunction with the school district, but that wasn't part of the bond. So those talks would need to be had by the city council in a joint workshop with the school board to hammer out details of that.
And I know you guys have a pretty good relationship, so I'm sure that
Mm-hmm.
that'll go. So in the last 3 years, that every city carries a healthy amount of debt. It's just kind
Mm-hmm.
of from what I've learned, and I'm not an expert on that. It's kind of par for the course. You carry a
Yeah.
little bit of debt in order to make things run. What is your thoughts on the debt in Midlothian?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the state requires us to carry about 90 days in what they call an emergency fund.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, right now our city has about 183 days of emergency fund. So we have over half. I mean, 2 times the required limit by the state, and our credit level is the cream of the crop when it comes to that. But as far as debt, Some of those bonds I was for, some of the bonds I were against because of what you said. A bond is debt. You know, when a bond is passed, it is debt that the city and the taxpayers will have to eventually pay. And just like our households, you know, every household should have a written budget. Every household, when you run out of money, you know, if you don't have credit, you're not going to spend it, and you don't need to get yourself into extreme debt. And you know, I've been trying to preach since I've been elected that we need to have as little debt as possible. In a perfect world, we would have no debt, but I'm not sure that no debt is realistic anywhere these days. But you need to have as low debt as possible. And you know, if reelected in May, that's one of my concerns, is that we need to start paying off some of this debt and not accrue more debt.
Right. Now, before I give you the mic to talk to the people of Midlothian,
Hmm.
I wanted to talk to you about growth and infrastructure.
Yeah,
Um, in the last 3 years, how have you handled growth? What are your thoughts on the way we've grown? And if you're
yeah.
elected, how would if you're reelected, how would you like to approach, or how will you continue to approach growth? And then we'll go into roads real quick.
Okay. You know, I always tell people when asked this question, I look at growth like we look, I have kids, you have kids. I look at growth like we look at our kids. You know, there was that one age, whether it be 5 or 10 or 15, that we just thought, man, I wish I could freeze my kid in time. I love this age with my kid. We can't.
Nope.
We can't. It's a fact of life. I remember when I was in high school, our population was about 6,000 people, maybe.
Wow.
I loved it then. If I could have frozen it then, I would have. I can't.
Yeah.
Growth, when you do something so good and you create an atmosphere in a school district and a city so good that everyone wants to move there, it's a good problem. Um, you know, with growth, I've tried to take the stance of responsible growth. And what I mean by responsible growth is not voting yes to everything. You know, there shouldn't be a rubber stamp on every development that's been brought before us. And I'm not afraid, as a council member, I'm not afraid to vote no. You know, I think there's a lot of pressure on council members to vote yes in all these new housing developments, commercial developments, under the guise of what brings in tax dollars. We only get one chance to build out our city. And when you vote yes on everything, you're compromising how good of a deal you could have gotten from the next developer, from the next developer. I think we really need to look at some of these developments coming into our city and say, is this the best for our citizens? It may be the best right now, but is it the best long term? And I've taken that approach, and I'm not afraid to vote no on some of these developments. And quite frankly, you know, voting no on some of these developments has probably cost me votes, but I don't care. I believe it was the right thing for the city. I believe it was not only the right thing for the city now, it's the right thing for the city in 20 years. We also have to consider our partners. We're partners with our school district, okay? These parents that get up early in the morning, get themselves ready for work, get their kids ready for school. I hear stories of parents over by Heritage. It takes them 45 minutes to get their kids from school, and they're traveling less than 2 miles. That's not acceptable. We've got to stop. We've got to slow down the rate of growth that we're growing. We've got to stop approving everything that comes before us uh, so fast, if for no other reason than nobody in the city of Midlothian moved here because they enjoy traffic jams. Traffic jams should never be in the same sentence with Midlothian, Texas. And quite frankly, we have them. We have them on both sides of towns at certain times of the day. It takes up our resources with our police department when they could be, you know, answering calls faster, doing proactive work instead of worrying about accidents here and there due to the traffic. And we're partners, like I said, we're partners with our school district. I, I believe in the last 10 years, our city has really done a disservice to the MISD in that we're almost making them try to build a school every 2 years. That's too much. It's too much of a burden on the school. It's too much of a burden on the school as far as buying the land, designing the school, and it's too much of a burden on the citizens because some of these roads, like 1387, you know, if we keep passing developments out that direction, 1387 people, a lot of people don't understand. That's a Texas Department of Transportation road. That's a TxDOT road. It's not a city road. We don't control that road. We can't go out and just widen that road. And so we're creating a problem that we can't even solve. And so we really, really, really need to slow down our developments. And that's what I've been doing. I'm not afraid to vote no. I'll continue to vote no unless something is just so extraordinarily great that I think we can't, we can't say no to it. And that's my stance on growth. That's my stance on the other topics as well.
Yeah, I mean the we do. You did mention that there is a bonding you're using towards roads. I mean,
Hmm.
like Walnut Grove is kind of rough right now, but
Hmm.
there's construction projects on that, so that's to be expected. But
Hmm.
the 1387, you're right. That it's something I'm on 1387 every day,
It's
sometimes
an
two or
issue,
three
isn't
a
it?
day.
Certain times of
It
day.
it is starting to become
Yeah.
interesting, very
Yeah.
interesting. It's a lot different than when I first got here in 14. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And
this is the point where I shut up and give you the mic, so you could talk directly to the people in Midlothian, because I'm sure they want to
okay.
hear from you.
Um, Here's what I want to tell the voters. When Hud Hartson personally goes to the ballot box, he votes for people that have a proven track record, people that are easy to talk to, people that are easy to get a hold of, uh, candidates, and people that do things. Since I've been elected in office, like I've told DV previously in this video, I've diligently worked with the rest of the council to improve the first responders' pay about 25%. I have voted uh, to lower the tax rate. I have voted for a no new revenue tax rate. I have more than doubled the senior tax freeze on their homes. I have voted to max out. I have supported the 20% homestead exemption. I have, when there was a need, when there was a panhandling issue going on in town, I came to the city attorney. I helped him and the rest of the staff and council craft a panhandling ordinance that was passed. Since that was passed, we haven't had any other issues. Um, when residents come to me with problems, when they come to me with problems like on Walnut Grove Road, the construction we're starting like at 4:35 in the morning, which is before they're allowed to start. I went to city staff. That was taken care of. I think I've been pretty responsive. Of course, no council member is perfect. There might be a phone call they miss here and there, but for the most part, I think I've made myself extremely available to people. I even tell people, hey, when I give you my phone number, you pass it out to any other citizen you want. I pass out that phone number like Halloween candy. Any public official should be easily accessible 7 days a week, not just Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. 7 days a week, they should be able to get a hold of their council member. I stand on my record. I've worked hard with our city as far as the budget. Um, I have many, many more accomplishments I could go through here that me and the council have done, but those are just a few. And my track record is one of being a fiscal conservative. I work well with the Ellis County Republican Party, and there's a reason why certain people are endorsed. Um, I have the endorsement of four-time former Mayor Maurice Osborne. I have the endorsement of former Mayor Dave Setzer. I have the endorsement of the Ellis County Republican Party. I have the endorsement of our state rep, very conservative state rep, Brian Harrison. It's because I work with those people. I have the endorsement of our county commissioner, Lewis Ponder. And I work closely with those people, and you have to. With the late Paul Perry, I worked with him to resolve a road issue out south of town, and it got fixed. A citizen had been complaining that this road had been terrible and this and that for years. I worked with our roads department, and that road butted up to the county. So I worked with Commissioner Perry, and we took care of it. It was simple as that. There was no fanfare. It was just taken care of. Um, those people that I mentioned, they trust me. I trust them. I've worked with them. And it takes that as a city councilman. You have to have that relationship with the county, with your state rep to get things done at times. Sometimes things that will benefit our citizens are bigger than the city. And that's why you need to have those relationships with other elected officials higher than you to get things done. They can open a door for you. I stand on my track record. I'm a family man. I'm a Christian. Like I said, I'm a public servant. most of my adult life, and I don't plan on changing that. And most importantly, I want people to realize the decisions I make on the city council and the votes I take aren't just for me now. I'm never moving from this city. I love this city. I'm running again because I love this city, and I'm not moving anywhere. So every vote I take will affect me for the rest of my life.
Right. Right. Well, as always, and I told every candidate, and if I didn't tell you at the beginning, I apologize. Thank you for wanting to continue to serve your community. You've had a life of service, and whether it be in the police department or military or just in general, you have a life of service, and
Mm-hmm.
then now you're serving your community. So thank you for wanting to serve your community and running and put your life into these politics that is Ellis County politics can get quite interesting in the last
Yes,
4
it
years
can.
covering.
And so someone's got to do it, and here I am.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a for those of you listening there, we're gonna have a candidate town hall, and so every candidate, including Mr. Hartson, has agreed to come on. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna have your questions on there. You can ask
Yes.
them live, or you could send them to Ellis Talker1 at gmail.com. Ellis Talker1 at gmail.com. And send your questions in. We want as much participation as possible because these guys are all about transparency. They all want to speak directly to you and keep you informed, and so that you make a good informed decision in that ballot box. Thank you so much again for coming on, sir. Can you stick around real quick?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having me.